I wonder if people would have some comments, questions, issues. Yeah.
I just think it's great, because I think this is a conversation. I don't know how often it's come up. Sounds like not very often, but there's so many demands of the situation of, you know, trying to appear to be a good reviewer, which means being a very critical reviewer and so forth. And there are lots of variables we could look at. I don't know if the discipline will really do that, but I think, like a lot of things that some of us, as we get older, are starting to say, things are changing, and we have to keep up with it. And I think you're just all three of these talks were great. You brought up some really good points, and I hope we do see some changes.
I just want to, because it was just a parenthesis in your list, and it didn't appear at all, Jerry, in your summary of kind of the prototype of what we developed by review system, and that's the re-review issue. I think, you know, you talk about all the burdens there are on the first round of review, and then as we have evolved a system, and so if I were writing your prototype, Jerry, I would have put at least 2 more iterations of that review process it's certainly typical of JPSP, and it is becoming more typical of PSPB, and that's what I mean by this drift toward that model. And I think if we just basically almost outlawed reviews and said the editor's job is to pick good reviewers to begin with, pay attention to them, make it clear what it would take to make the revision acceptable, and then evaluate whether they got it or not and make a decision. I mean, all by itself, that would eliminate about 1/3 of what's going on in the escalation in our system. And of course, right, there's occasions, a technical issue or something that may require going back to an expert for something. But I think it defies the meaning of editorial process to keep sending things back as if it was a repeated election process or voting process or something. So I mean, I think there's a lot of other issues that have been brought up that have to do with just rethinking our whole models. But even within the model and trying to make it more manageable, I think eliminating re-reviews, even if it meant a higher rejection rate, is something that we would all find at least a temporary fix. So I've had my one last rant.
Let me come back.
I was just going to say, when I edited the Journal of Research and Personality a couple of years ago, and we tried something experimentally, which they've continued on, and I think it worked extremely well. It's a policy called Streamline Review. And what we did is we accepted, if you submitted a paper to JPSP and it got rejected, you could turn around and send that paper to me with the reviews, right, that you got back from JPSP, and a letter responding to those reviews saying how you'd responded to them, what changes you'd made. So just as if it had been re-invited, right? And then I made a decision. I made a decision within 30 days. I never sent it out to another reviewer. I just made a decision. The last year that I was the editor, I accepted about 17 papers. That way we published probably, I don't know, maybe 80 or 90 papers. So it was getting up to, maybe 20% or something of the papers were coming in that way. And occasionally I'd get something where I didn't really feel qualified, and I would basically get a guest editor. And usually it was one of my associate editors, but sometimes I had to even go outside, I would go outside that. And it worked really well, and it's something that we've continued under the new editor. And because part of the burnout is that, not only that, you've got multiple reviewers on every paper, but then those papers are getting recycled over and over. And how many times have you seen the same paper? 2 or 3 times. It's like, I already reviewed this one once, I'm not going to do it again, And it's a huge, the reviews were good in the first place. You didn't need to go through that process and take up all that time. And so that's something I thought worked really well. Carolyn Morph is working on implementing that policy for, I forget what the self-journal that she edits is called. And I found out the other day, one of the publishers at Elsevier sent me a link, and apparently they've set up like this experimental website where you can share reviews among a whole consortium of journals. So this is something where if you get it, you know, rejected by one journal, if this consortium of journals, for every journalist participating in this consortium, you can just turn around and they will forward the reviews to the editor of the other journal where you want to submit it, which is really actually a good thing, because that, you know, there's some tricks in the system the way that we did it. So this would be much better if it was a consortium of journals who would agree to participate in that, and you could just have the editors then being involved in directly forwarding those reviews and things. But anyway, there are lots of innovative ideas, and other fields are doing them, and we're really not considering.
Yeah. Other issues? Okay. I guess.
I think there are a lot of potential benefits and efficiencies in doing exactly that. But one thing that's kind of odd about it is that the editor of the original journal knows exactly who the reviewers were who made these comments and can consider that. But I presume when the authors send you these papers in, you don't have a clue who they are. So that's one thing that's a little odd, and the reviewers don't know. And it gives the editor of the first journal a lot of power. And was it only for JPSP or any journal?
Well,
That
we implemented the policy on sort of a trial basis, and we did it only basically for APA and APS journals. So, you know, we just said, look, there are a lot of really good papers being submitted to these journals that get turned down for reasons other than poor quality research. And, you know, they're, you know, clearly papers that deserve to be published. It's a matter of finding the right venue. And, you know, so, you know, we thought it was a really good idea. I sort of vetted this idea with about maybe 20 different editors or something before we actually implemented it. We made a lot of refinements to the policy, sort of built in some safeguards and things. But I did not talk to a single editor who felt that there was any sort of ethical issue, you know, because I mean, as a reviewer, once you, you know, send in that review, the author is free to go around and give that review to any person they want to, you know, to get input or whatever. So there's sort of no, I think, implicit assumption that the review you write as an honest reviewer won't be handed around. That is much better. It's much better.
the officialness of some sort of consortium of sharing reviews and not duplicating the whole thing, I think is a great idea.
Sort of evolve towards. But I agree, it's totally better, but we were just going to be maverick and try it out and see how it worked.
I think I'm gonna have the last word. I guess all I would say is that the one thing that comes across, I think, in all three of the talks and just the general situation is that I think that the field in some ways has lived with, in the last decade, with a kind of low-level chronic emergency. And it's tried all kinds of different partial sort of strategies without actually ever approaching a question. And the basic question is that this system, which obviously gravitated to some other things later, a little later, but the basic system, which was really adopted by most scientific journals right after World War II, that was a very different era, the technologies were totally different. And the fact that some fields have not thought about the other possible options, it's just time to do that. And we may find some of the options don't work, but at least we will have made conscious decisions about it, because the ultimate thing I think that will happen is the chronic emergency eventually is going to cause some changes, and many of those could have very undesirable consequences. So we should just be conscious. Consciousness is good. Most of the time. But now let's go to the reception and get unconscious.